Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 31st ever Highlight Haven interview. My name is Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by ESPN sports writer Tim MacMahon. Tim, it's great to have you on.
It is a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, let's jump right into it. I just want to start by asking when you first knew that you wanted to work in the sports industry.
That's funny. I actually went to a little Division II school in Florida, and I thought I was going to play basketball and major in business. And neither one of those lasted the first semester. The business classes, I was like, this just isn't for me. And then basketball, to be honest with you, I realized pretty quickly, like, you're not actually going to play much. You're going to be riding the bench.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to make a full time commitment to wave the towel at the end of the bench. But I knew then my dad had always told me find a job that you enjoy.
Mhm.
And I knew sports where my interests were. And so for me, the journalism path was a way to be involved in sports. I ended up transferring and majoring in journalism, always in the sports media space and just something that kind of clicked and went from there. But like I said, my motivation to be a journalist was because I wanted a job that was involved with sports.
Yeah, now, of course, on March 25th, your book, The Wonder Boy, will be getting published. This book discusses the twists and turns the Mavericks have taken while trying to build a championship team around Luka Doncic. What has the process been like writing this book?
I tell you what, I might hire you as my publicist. I like the way that sounded. So this was a book that the publisher actually approached me. A colleague of mine, Brian Windhurst, has written a couple books, New York Times bestsellers, and they first went to him with the idea, "Hey, we want a Luca book," and he said, he referred them to me. He said, you should talk to McMahon. He's covered Luca's entire career,
Yeah.
and I knew Luca wouldn't be enthusiastic and cooperative. So I said, I don't want to do like a traditional
Mhm.
biography. Um, I think it's a little bit early for that. Certainly Luca did. And again, I knew he wasn't going to be somebody who would want to sit down and do long interviews and those kind of things. And so I said, I'd rather take this angle where it's really kind of about the pressure and the process of trying to build around a prodigy after you draft him, because there is that pressure. We've seen it over and over again in the NBA of kind of build it or they might leave. And there have been a lot of twists and turns. There's been a lot of drama and dysfunction. And it's still like the pressure remains, but the Mavericks have been able to kind of come out the other end of it where it looked pretty dicey there for a little while, really until this season. And so, I did make a trip over to Slovenia and followed the Slovenian national team to Germany for Eurobasket a couple years ago, just to kind of get background on where he's from and his origins and those kind of things. But the vast majority of this was reporting based on the kind of the inner workings of the Dallas Mavericks leading up to Luca's time here, and certainly since the Mavericks drafted him.
Yeah, and of course, you are the co-host on the podcast, The Hoop Collective, along with Brian Windhorst, who you mentioned earlier, and Tim Bontemps. How would you describe the connections you've been able to build with these guys over the years?
Frankly, can't stand either of them. No, I'm just kidding. No, it is the Hoop Collective with Brian Windhurst. It's his
Yeah.
podcast. And then Bontemps and I just happen to be regular guests that are on the
Mhm.
vast majority of the episodes. But no, it's fun. Obviously we're all work together at ESPN, but we very rarely see each other in person. We live thousands of miles away from each other. But we're three people who I think look at the game in the league through different lenses, and kind of we have our own ideas about it, but similar passion and obviously similar jobs. I would say is if you talk about NBA podcasts, we are talking to as many people within the league, attending as many games, watching as many games as I think anybody, and that kind of gives us a unique perspective. But then it's a pretty dorky hoops podcast, if you want to be honest about it. Like we get into the weeds on roster building and all the kind of things that go along with that. Getting in the weeds on some nerdy hoop stuff, but it's a very natural flow of kind of three buddies who are in the industry. It's the same kind of conversations we have
Yeah.
if we get together over dinner. We just do it in podcast form.
Yeah, and moving over to specific NBA storylines. There's been a lot of drama recently between both Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat. Just
Mhm.
2 days ago, Butler was suspended for 2 games after missing a flight with the team. Where is Butler's most likely trade destination as we get closer to the trade deadline in early February?
Yeah, and look, the most likely
Mhm.
is the Phoenix Suns. That's the most
Yeah.
preferable to him. How likely it is, that's a great question
Mhm.
because there's a lot of things involved there. And one of the one of the biggest things involved there is the guy who would be moved out for him, Bradley Beal. One has a no trade clause. Two is not somebody that the Miami Heat would be willing to take in return. And so, we're talking about a deal that would have to be multiple teams, maybe three, four, five. I don't know, how big of this deal might get. And the more teams you add to a deal, the more complicated it gets, the more potentials for this thing to break down. So, it's not necessarily the only possibility. It's the best possibility. And how good of a possibility it is, I couldn't tell you. Would just be speculating on that. Um, Now, the way this is all played out, with it being a total mess in Miami and Jimmy doing everything he can to kind of force the Heat's hand,
Mhm.
this was predictable. You knew this was happening as soon as he didn't get extended over the summer.
Yeah.
We've seen him force his way out of town before, and it's not pretty. It's dramatic. It's good for the media business. Certainly hadn't been good for the Miami Heat's business, and I'm not sure at this point it's good for Jimmy Butler's business. But that's where we are, and stay tuned until the trade deadline.
Yeah, now at this point, based on what you've heard, how much do you think Butler, how much say does he have in where he ends up?
Well, there's a player like this always has a certain amount of say, just because if he's sending a message to a team, through whatever back channels, hey, I don't want to be there, then if you're that team, are you giving up assets to get a guy who doesn't want to be there,
Mhm.
who has a history of lighting things on fire when he's somewhere he doesn't want to be? And so there is a certain level of say there. And again, he's made it very clear through a variety of ways: his hair, his shoes, his voice, that he wants to be in Phoenix. But this is not a case where a guy just gets to snap his fingers
Mhm.
and say, "That's where I want to be."
Yeah.
Again, if Bradley Beal is not on board, the thing can't happen. That's just a matter of fact that he has a no trade clause. And so, one part of this, there's a lot of moving pieces here. One piece is they have to find a team that wants Bradley Beal where he would want to go, and then make all the math work and then make everybody happy from an asset
Mhm.
standpoint. And obviously, the trade that the Suns just made, where they gave up their one first round pick they could trade, the 2031 pick unprotected,
Yeah.
to Utah Jazz for what will be lesser, late first round picks, most likely, three of them.
Yeah.
Jazz are saying, hey, we'll take a swing at what they think could be a high lottery pick at that point. And the Suns are getting a few first round picks instead of one, because they might need to spread them around to make a deal like this. So, um, a lot of times when a trade like that's made, something's already in place. This was not one of those times. And,
Mhm.
again, we'll see if this all ends up happening. And if it doesn't, we'll see how things go the rest of the season in Miami. I can't imagine it'd be much fun, though.
Yeah, now over the offseason, the Minnesota Timberwolves traded Karl Anthony Towns to the New York Knicks for Julius Randle. Towns is having one of the best years of his career, averaging 25 points per game along with 14 rebounds. On the other hand, Minnesota is just the eighth seed in the West after making the conference finals last season. Looking back at it now, did the Timberwolves trading Karl Anthony Towns ruin their chances of winning a championship this season?
I don't think they helped them. I won't go so far as to say ruin, because, I've seen teams click, get rolling, get hot, and make a deep playoff run. I
Mhm.
mean, honestly, as recently as last season with the Dallas Mavericks, they did
Yeah.
not look like a contender. Made a couple midseason trades. Even after that, struggled a little bit. Boom, got hot the last quarter of the season and suddenly morphed into a contender. The Timberwolves still have talent. Anthony Edwards is absolutely one of the most talented players in the league, but they are very transparent about yes, the fit has been a struggle. It's been clunky. They're trying to figure things out, form chemistry on the fly. There's some spacing issues with when you have Ant and Julius Randle, both guys who love to pound the ball. Rudy Gobert obviously being a non-shooter. How does all that work? They've really struggled in clutch situations. It's been a tough early return from that trade. And look, there were financial reasons for that trade. I would say not just as well, but probably even primarily financial reasons for that trade. But at this point, it looks a lot better for the Knicks than it does the Timberwolves for sure.
Yeah, now obviously this season has been a massive disappointment for the Philadelphia 76ers so far. Joel Embiid has played just 13 of the 76ers' 42 games this season. Rookie Jared McCain had a season-ending injury after tearing his meniscus back in December, and Paul George has missed a lot of time due to injuries as well. With the 76ers being the 11th seed in the Eastern Conference, where do they go from here?
Boy, oh boy, oh boy. I mean, it's a mess. It really is. After quote unquote winning the summer, it seems like everything that could go wrong has gone wrong with them. Um, you know, it can Joel Embiid get healthy? Can he get back on the floor? Honestly, recently that team is reeked of laying over, of rolling over, and not putting forth the effort that's required to have a chance to win in the NBA. That's a whole nother issue. And you look at it, and they owe their first round pick, top six protected this season, to the Oklahoma City Thunder. At a certain point, um, the best case scenario for them might be getting lucky in the lottery, moving into the top six and keeping their pick. It's just really hard to imagine something where suddenly Embiid's healthy and on the floor on a consistent basis, and Paul George is, and they're able to create the kind of chemistry, like instantaneously microwave that kind of chemistry that they need to be any sort of a threat in the Eastern Conference, especially considering the fact that they obviously will have to one, climb their way into a play-in spot, and then two, earn a playoff seat out of the play-in scenario, and then you're running into either the Cleveland Cavaliers or Boston Celtics in the first round. I don't think it'll be another summer celebration in Philadelphia.
Yeah, now this season, another pretty underwhelming team has been the Phoenix Suns, as you mentioned earlier, who are the 10th seed in the West. Really underwhelming for a team obviously led by Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. Something has to change in Phoenix if they want to be contenders. I know you talked about potentially bringing in Jimmy Butler, but let's say Bradley Beal doesn't want to find a new team. What do you think is another alternative option they could do to start becoming contenders this year?
Uh, I don't think they will. I mean, you can never say never with a team that has Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. Obviously, we're talking about two of the top 10 or 15 players in the NBA, but to make the leap from bottom of the play-in, scrapping for a play-in spot to being a bona fide contender, I don't think it's realistic. And I mentioned the trade they just made with the Utah Jazz, so they have a few first-round picks to play with. But they've got so many because of the new collective bargaining agreement and the fact that they've just blown by the second apron in the salary cap. They are really restricted on what they can do trade wise, as well as the fact that they've used most of their assets to put this team together. Um, I compare the Suns to somebody who just keeps on piling up credit card debt. They're going deeper and deeper and deeper into debt. At some point, that bill is going to come due, and you're going to have teams like the Houston Rockets who have a bunch of their picks, like the Jazz who just got 2031, being the ones that are collecting the debt.
Mhm. Yeah, now this has also been a rough season for the Golden State Warriors, who are the 11th seed in the Western Conference. At this point in his career, do you think Steph Curry would rather value loyalty and stay with the Warriors for the rest of his career or contend and potentially move on to a new team?
I cannot imagine Steph Curry wearing another franchise's uniform. I can't imagine him playing for any other team but the Golden State Warriors. Now, look, a few years back, would I have said the same thing about Klay Thompson? Yes, but that really ultimately ended up being almost a mutual decision.
Mhm.
Steph, I think that he puts a lot of pride and value into being a one franchise legend. There's not a lot of them. You can talk about your Dirk Nowitzki's, your Larry Birds. Yeah, yeah, I'm not even going to put a Reggie Miller on this list, but champion one franchise guys, Kobe Bryant,
Yeah.
obviously Tim
Mhm.
Duncan. It's not a really
Mhm.
long list, and I think having covered Dirk, for example, Dirk won one championship in
Mhm.
Dallas, and he had to wait until he was in his early 30s to win it, pretty deep into his career, about a dozen years into his career. And then the twilight, the Mavericks tried to kind of put contenders back together, but once that championship team broke up, they never got close again. And Dirk acknowledged, like, if I hadn't have won that one championship, it would be a really difficult decision
Mhm.
because then maybe you do want to chase a ring. Well, Steph hasn't just won one championship, he won four.
Mhm.
And so, would he love to contend at this point in his career? Obviously
Mhm.
and absolutely. Would he go chase a ring with another franchise? I just cannot imagine that being the case.
Yeah, now Zion Williamson has played just 10 games this season and missed 35 games. In those 10 games, he's averaged 22 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 assists. However, Zion was out against the Jazz on the 20th and will also be out against the Grizzlies tonight. Obviously, we know how good Zion can be when he's on the court, but do you believe that he has what it takes to stay on the court?
I don't have any evidence that he
Mhm.
does, unfortunately. That's just a simple fact of the matter. And I've said this. It feels like Zion and the Pelicans are kind of marching towards a breakup, right? And they've just got to figure out kind of the terms, and that is the Pelicans have to find a trade for him. And I don't think that's something that's going to happen before this deadline. I don't think it's a priority for that to happen before this deadline, because what they need and what Zion needs is for him to get back on the floor, for him to kind of restore some of his value. Um, but there will be, if it reaches that point and they start aggressively exploring the trade market for him, there will be interest. And I know this just from talking to people around the league. He's an incredible talent, an incredibly unique talent. And with that type of talent, there will be teams that will say, well, maybe if we could get him here, things would be different. And maybe he does need a fresh start. I don't know. But for a guy who is just so uniquely explosive and talented, it's been a pretty sad,
Yeah.
almost 6-year run now in New Orleans.
Transitioning from one first round pick to another, Victor Wembanyama has been revolutionizing the game of basketball in just the second year of his career. This season, Wembanyama is averaging 25 points per game, 11 rebounds, and 4 blocks. Despite having played just 108 career games, where would you say Wemby ranks among all active NBA players?
That's a really good question. I was actually thinking today,
Mhm.
will he be on MVP ballots? There's 5 spots on an MVP ballot.
Probably.
Is he get? I mean, he'll be on some.
Mhm.
Is he a top 5 player? I don't know. I think he's in
I, th- I
consideration.
think I think the people that wouldn't put him on top 5 are the people that value team success, probably
Right,
a little
right.
more than overall accolades.
Yeah, but he will. He's a guy who, if he doesn't win multiple
Mhm.
championships and multiple MVPs, he's going to be considered a disappointment,
Yeah,
which is both a testament to the
yeah,
talent and a pretty big burden to put on a 21-year old shoulders. But we've not seen somebody like this before. We've not seen a guy who's 7'4", 7'5", who can shoot it like that, who's that fluid of an athlete, who can handle the ball like that. I mean, the
mhm,
shot blocking is just incredible. This is a guy who he's blocking a shot, grabbing a rebound, leading a break, throwing a lob to a teammate. He's hitting trailer threes from 30 something feet.
mhm.
He's taken one step after crossing half court and dunking the ball. I mean, like If you watch most games, if you watch a Spurs game, he will make you laugh out loud 2 or 3 times just with some of the things that he's pulling off out there.
Yeah, now this season, the NBA's viewership has been down around 18% compared to last year. There's obviously many reasons why viewership may be down, but if you had to name just one reason, what would it be?
I honestly am not qualified for all that. I don't like. I'm not an expert in like the TV audience stuff. The one thing I will say is I don't buy that the NBA is a bad product. I don't buy that the NBA game is not fun to watch. I watch basketball every single night,
Yeah.
whether I'm in an arena or at home. I'm watching guys, like Victor Wembanyama, like Nikola Jokic, like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, like Luka Doncic, like Giannis Antetokounmpo. I just named 5 superstar players who are all drastically different, extraordinarily skilled, but in drastically different ways, all extremely fun to watch. So I think the on floor product, I think basketball right now is as aesthetically pleasing as it's ever been. Obviously TV in general, it's an interesting thing with all the different entertainment options, with all the cord cutting, et cetera, et cetera. That's all part of the equation. But I don't buy this notion that the NBA needs to make drastic changes to the on-court product. The on-court product is still really, really good. And I would say it's as good as it's ever been.
Yeah, now a big reason why people are blaming bad viewership is three-pointers. This season, just under 38 three-pointers are being attempted in each game per team, which is the most of any season in NBA history. A lot of people are saying it's boring to watch teams just chuck up three-pointers all game. You obviously are watching games all night. Is this kind of something that you see as well? Does it get repetitive? Does it get boring?
I don't think so. I mean, people act like the 90s was like some kind of just more entertaining brand of basketball. I don't like people want 86, 82 games. People want this slow paced, mud wrestling matches. And I love basketball growing up, but it was not a more entertaining brand of ball. I like watching this fast paced, wide open style of play. And people say they're just chucking up threes. I would say let's give some credit to one, the skill development, the fact that most times when a team has a lineup on the floor, at least 4 of the guys, if not 5 of the guys, are capable 3-point shooters, which is a drastic change from 20, 30 years ago. And the ability to create, some of it's scheme, some of it's just like, again, Luka Doncic in my backyard, right? Not only can he create threes for himself and a step back three along, James Harden kind of revolutionized the game with that, and Luka's taking it to an even different level. So not only can he create threes for himself, but he's as good as there is at creating threes for teammates. And I think it's awfully fun to watch a team try to trap Luka high on the right wing, and then he fires a pass that's on the money in the opposite corner, 40, 45 feet away, hits a teammate in the shooter's pocket and generates wide open threes. And then, why else is that open? Because there's the threat of the big man diving down the middle of the floor for the lob. So teams generate threes in a lot of different ways. It's not Sunday morning pickup ball where whoever dribbles the ball across half court just chunks something up there. So again, I think there's the oversimplification, and I don't understand, like, why is the mid-range jump shot something that people suddenly think is the most exciting play in the world? Give me a wide open game, and it's wide open because you have to guard guys out to the 3-point line and beyond. A lot of these guys are spotting up from 30 feet. You got to guard them there. The floor is wide open. It opens up the driving lanes, and you see, like, put 4 shooters around Giannis, and you've got a 6'11" guy who's attacking the rim and dunking on anybody who gets in his way. I think that's entertaining.
Yeah, now I also think obviously a big part of it is analytics and the fact that either three pointers, getting shots at the rim, or obviously the free throw line is the best ways to score in basketball analytically. And scoring rates have gone up a lot since, the 90s that you were mentioning. So it's just like, why would teams go back to how they were playing when offenses are clearly a lot more productive right now? And the last point I want to focus on that may be affecting these ratings are rivalries, which have always been a massive part of basketball, obviously. And I think rivalries are more defined by players rather than teams. Obviously, you have Magic versus Bird, you have Michael Jordan versus Isaiah Thomas, and then back end of the 2010s, Curry versus LeBron. And I feel like nowadays, of course, not all players like each other, but I feel like a lot of players have mutual respect for each other, and it doesn't cause as much rivalries across the league. Obviously, it's not as physical. Do you think that plays into viewership as well?
I think that rivalries are definitely important.
Mhm.
Um, and I would say as much as there's like the Bird Magic rivalry, they were also filming McDonald's commercials together during the summer and
Yeah.
Converse commercials and things like that. So the culture has changed a little bit. I think certainly the AAU system, when these guys grow up playing together against each other, the fact that a lot of these guys are obviously playing together on Team USA or whatever the case may be over the summer, you can argue that there's more friendliness in the NBA than before. But there are still some rivalries. I mean, for example, the Dallas Mavericks and Oklahoma City Thunder. This thing has a chance to be a really fun rivalry,
Yeah.
and part of that is a lot like you mentioned the Bulls and Pistons. Part of that rivalry, you have to have two really good teams. You got to have some bad blood. You're seeing some of that developing, and then the proximity helps too, right? The fact that it's 3 hours back and forth. You don't necessarily need it. Lakers and Celtics is the best rivalry, certainly in basketball, one of the best rivalries in all sports, and that's coast to coast. But rivalries develop with repeated playoff meetings as much as anything else. And we've got a chance for some really good ones to develop here in the NBA over these next few years.
Yeah, now speaking of the Thunder, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is currently the favorite to win the MVP this season. He leads the league with 32 points per game to go along with 6 assists and just over 5 rebounds. Of course, the Thunder are also the best team in the entire Western Conference with a record of 36-8. Would you consider Gilgeous-Alexander to be your favorite for MVP as well?
It's a two-horse race at
Yeah.
this point, and then obviously the other guy is Nikola Jokic. And
Mhm.
as soon as I think Shea's the favorite, you have a situation like last night where Joker goes for, I forget what his line was, but it was like 35
Mhm.
points,
Yeah.
20 something rebounds, 17 assists, hits a 70-footer at the end of the third quarter. I mean, Joker's won three. Obviously, if it's even, I think you'll go with the guy who hasn't won one yet. But I can't make a case against Joker. I can make a case for SGA. I can't make a case against Joker. He's playing as well as he's ever played before.
Mhm. Yeah, now the Boston Celtics are currently the top contenders to win the 2025 NBA championship. However, they are just 5-5 in their last 10 games, coming off a 21-point loss to the Lakers. Have the Celtics shown you enough to prove that they deserve to be the favorites right now, or are you leaning towards a team like the Thunder or the Cavs?
Well, they certainly showed me enough last season when they basically cruised to that championship. Then you wonder, coming off of a run like that, how locked in are they? There's maybe a natural letdown affect the next regular season. Okay, let us know when the playoffs start, that sort of a thing. Um, I don't think they'll cruise to another one though. They might win one, but there wasn't a team like the Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference last year. Obviously, Oklahoma City has made a significant leap. Frankly, I think that if the Nuggets had gotten through and been in rhythm, the Nuggets could have given the Celtics a serious run last year. I mean, Joker's a matchup problem for anybody. So um, whether they should be the favorite or not, I'm not sure about. I just know that it's not going to be as easy as it was last year for Boston.
Yeah, now I do have one final question to ask. If there was one piece of advice you could give to an aspiring sports broadcaster and journalist like me, what would it be?
Well, number one, I would say you're way ahead of the game. That's for sure. And because the piece of advice that I always give is to
Mhm.
get as much experience as possible and as much variety in your experience as you possibly can. And the fact you're doing, what are you, 13 years old?
Yeah, 13.
Yeah, the fact you're doing this right now at 13, you're way ahead of the game. And I can tell like you take this very seriously. You're very well prepared. You've done your research. Um, this is a great start for you. Again, try to get as much experience as you can. Even if you think, for example, you want to be in a certain section of media, the more you can do, the better off you're going to be. The more experience you have as you get to the point where you're, for example, applying for college journalism programs, if that's the route you take, it'll look great on a resume. I would try to get newspaper experience as you're growing up. This kind of experience is great. I don't know if you're interested in play by play or behind the scenes, the production and things. And not only are you getting as much experience as you can, and you're building different skills, but there might be a thing where you didn't think maybe that was the path you want to take, but it really clicks.
Mm.
And just be open minded. But the fact that you're already doing this and you're already putting this kind of effort and this kind of preparation in is extremely impressive. So, in short, my advice to you would be keep doing what you're doing. You're off to a great start.
Yeah, really appreciate the kind words. Of course, really appreciate the advice. With that being said, can't thank you enough for coming on. Is there anything else you want to say to the people watching before we wrap things up?
I know. I just really appreciate you having me on. And when you are my boss in 20 years, I hope you're nice to me.
And where can the people watching this find some of your work?
You can find me at ESPN.com, on the social media sites at ESPN_McMahon, and on the Hoop Collective, which you can find on YouTube and all your favorite podcast platforms.
Again, big thanks to Tim McMahon for being the 31st ever Highlight Haven interview guest. And as always, we will see you next time.